Hi, I'm Dr. Hackey Reitman. Welcome to another episode of Exploring Different Brains. Today, coming to us all the way from the United Kingdom, about an hour south of London, is the wonderful Dr. Nancy Doyle. Nancy, welcome to Exploring Different Brains.
Thank you. Hello.
Well, thank you for being with us. Before I butcher your introduction, why don't you give us a proper introduction of yourself?
Thank you. Okay, so I'm Dr. Nancy Doyle. I'm a psychologist who specializes in neurodiversity and employment. So I've worked for around 25 years in the disability inclusion field, specifically around how workplaces can be more inclusive of people with all kinds of disabilities, but particularly invisible disabilities or neurodiversity, depending on which lens you want to put on it. And also working with individuals with those conditions directly, looking at strategies for managing symptoms, managing difficulties, but more importantly, recognizing talents. I run a non-profit called Genius Within CIC, which operates in both the UK and the USA. And again, we work with on the individual level, but also with businesses, people who are unemployed, people who want to achieve more in their career, and businesses that want to be more inclusive. And I also developed the ideas behind the Employables, which is a show that has recently aired on A&E. And I piloted that show with the BBC, and we've run two series in the UK. It has also aired in other countries.
And what do you do in your spare time?
Yeah, I have twins.
Oh boy.
I have ADHD myself. So as far as spare time goes, it's important for me to be active and to have lots to do. I genuinely have quite high energy levels, and generally find that I'm doing quite a lot. So yeah, there is idle hands are the devil's playground where it comes to me. The more I'm doing work-wise and positively, the better off I am in lots of respects.
Tell us about your twins.
So I have 13-year-old twin boys called Tom and Ollie, and they are currently with friends in Vermont, USA, exploring the wilderness, kayaking, swimming, running around in somebody's truck, and generally making mayhem. That's what they're up to right now.
Do you find it difficult to be in both the United Kingdom and the United States?
Not at all. My father's from New Jersey. I'm a US citizen. So in many ways, I think my natural home is America. Yeah, I'm much more American than I am English. So in England, I have ADHD, but in New Jersey, where my family are from, I'm just kind of normal.
Well, I'm from Jersey City myself. My folks had a gas station there. So, which part of Jersey were your dad from?
Near the Asbury Park area, so Hazlitt, Monmouth County.
Oh yeah, nice down there.
Yeah, not far from Red Bank, that kind of area.
Sure.
The shore.
The Jersey Shore.
The Jersey Shore. See, don't let the accent fool you. I'm really a Jersey girl.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
I thought there was something different about you. You do have that Jersey running through your veins, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Tell us about the Genius Within.
So the Genius Within organization, so I started it in 2011, and at that point it was really just an extension of my own consultancy. So I had worked as an individual practitioner and kind of clinician, working with individuals and businesses, and it is actually a family issue. So when my kids started school, I think lots of parents think this. They think that when their kids start school, they're going to have loads of time on their hands. And what actually happens when your kids start school is that your whole day is curtailed between 9 and 3 or 8 and 2 or whenever the school hours are open. So what I used to do when my boys were very young is I used to say, right, I have 3 days work in Sheffield, or I'm going to a conference abroad. Hey, Grandma, I have these two boys for a couple of days, and grandmas would say, yay. But once they have to be at school every day, grandmas aren't quite so up for that. Grandmas don't like brush your teeth, do your homework, put your shoes on, we have to go. Grandma's like, let's go get ice cream. Let's have a late bedtime. So it was quickly not working. So I had this, my husband and I sat down and we looked at our respective work because we were both kind of doing consultancy type things and all over the place. And I did the math and I said, right, if I subcontract the far away clients and just do the clients that are nearby me within the school day, we can afford this. We'll make in enough money. I'll take a small commission and I'll subcontract the work. So that was in 2011. And I had 7 people that I was subcontracting work to. In 2012, it was 25. In 2013, it was 52. The following year, 74. Yada, yada, yada. And now we have 150 associates that we subcontract to and 42 employees who also work in the prison service and for people who are doing funded projects for people who are long-term unemployed. So my job has changed, really. Genius Within was a very emergent thing. The neurodiversity movement is, it's got the wind beneath its sails at the moment, and it's really getting out there. I've been doing it for 20 years, but I think the point at which I decided to set up Genius Within was exactly the right moment to catch that wind. And neurodiversity has become the new diversity and inclusion. It's become the new talent advantage for businesses. And there's a real paradigm shift going on in the in our consciousness about this. And we were in the right place at the right time, doing the right things, doing it from a position of what is good about this? What can you bring to a workplace? What do you do well? What are your strengths? What is your genius within? What is the stuff that makes you a specialist that we could be getting value from as an organization or as a community, and how can we capitalize on that? And that's always been my MO. And when I was just me, it was my MO. But the point that I set up Genius Within was just the right place at the right time. So, that's why things moved quite quickly. But it's been like playing catch up ever since, that kind of going from a business that was based on my kitchen table, where it was me and the cat and a few people that I would subcontract to now I have a head of finance and a head of human resources, and now I'm a CEO. I'm not Nancy the renegade psychologist anymore. I'm Nancy the CEO. So it's been a huge learning curve for me as well in that process.
Wow. And your whole MO is positive assessment.
That's one of our MOs, yeah. So the thing that I was railing against when I got into this work was I couldn't understand why we use terms like specific learning disabilities. If it's a specific learning disability, there's something specific that's an issue, but everything else is fine. So why aren't we talking about the everything else that's fine? So there's a whole movement in psychology, the positive psychology movement, which has been around for a long time. This is something that I studied and I thought was very interesting. And I just was finding myself very frustrated that I was meeting people for coaching support who had psychology reports. And I would read their psychology reports and I would look at the data in it. And it would say things to me like, this person is in the top 3% of the population for verbal skills. And they would have no idea about that. What they knew about was that their spelling was terrible, or their concentration was poor, or their social skills were difficult. They had no idea that they had this tremendous ability in verbal reasoning. And I would think to myself, well, wow, what a difference it's making to you when I tell you that, But then the next logical step is, why do you need an extra person to tell you that when you've already had psychological assessment? Surely part of the psychological assessment should be to allow you to know the full range of your abilities. So the things that you're struggling with and what to do about it, but also the things that you're great at and how to work with that. So I kind of commandeered the assessment process, and rather than it being about, acquiring funding to provide support for things that are difficult and to, create a medical this distinction of something that is pathological and must be treated, to make it more of a catharsis, to make it something that allowed people to develop self-awareness and self-confidence and self-belief, and to then create career goals based around that, and to have hope. So I see the positive assessment process as providing a spark of hope where there has been no hope, where people are very aware of what they can't do and what they struggle with, going, well, actually, yes, I'm not going to take that away from you. Those things are real and true and difficult, but see this shiny thing over there. Let's pay attention to that for a minute. Let's look at the shiny thing. The positive assessment isn't about glossing over difficulties. It's just about providing a balanced view, and there is always a balanced view. There are always things that people can do at any range of ability. There's something that people can do, and the job of a psychology assessment, I think, is to find that as part of it, and to work with that and hone awareness of it, so that people leave feeling empowered rather than
Diminished rather than diminished.
Diminished, exactly, rather than diminished or disempowered. You know, sometimes a diagnosis can be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh, yes. And then we fail in our society to enable, like I have a chapter in the Asper Tools book on harnessing the hyper interests.
Sure, that's the career path right there.
Right there. And
Yeah.
all of our wonderful 18-year-old and above neurodivergent interns here, they're harnessing their hyper interest. We say, find out what you like, but it's very hard in a system that's one size fits all, and you don't get to try video editing or an interview like this, or transcribing or researching or writing. And so I applaud you. Let's focus on the positives and see what we can do with that. Now let's segue into your work and what you have found in the prison population.
Yeah, so this is very interesting to me. So so before I set up Genius Within, one things I would do as a consultant is work with people who are long-term unemployed. And there's a lot of talk around people not having the right level of motivation, which I always found very patronizing. You know, if you're hopeless, you're not going to be motivated. And I always felt once we started to be successful as a business, and we started doing kind of human resources, occupational health interventions, and earning money. I have some major banking groups that are my clients, and so we're earning a good living now from this, and that's great. And I just thought, well, hold on a second. My company legal status is community interest and non-profit. So should I really only be working with the people who are already fairly successful? Let's be honest, because if you already have a job, that's a level of success that a lot of neurodiverse people do not have. They don't have that level of success. So should we actually be working where people are less successful? And I have some experience of that, so let's give it a go. So we started doing some pilot projects in prisons. One thing I did before the pilot interventions was do a positive assessment with the men that we were going to be working with. And when I did the positive assessments, what I found is that on average, the guys had kind of visual abilities in the top 10% of the population, and memory and concentration scores in the bottom 20%. So that's quite a big difference. That's very typical for many forms of neurodifference. But it's almost exactly the same scores as the students that we were doing positive assessments for who were in med school. So I have a couple of contracts in universities, and in this one particular university, it's in Southeast London, and we were working in a prison in Southeast London, a really difficult prison, the most secure prison in the UK. It's where they keep the terrorism suspects in the UK. I mean, this place is like Fort Knox. You cannot get into it. It's really, really harsh environment. And I'm thinking, here's a group of people. They are literally miles away from each other. They have the same ability, but this group are in med school. This group are in the worst prison in the UK. How is this possible? What are we doing wrong here? This is ridiculous. And so we've gone on to develop training courses and coaching programs, which start with the positive assessment, and then kind of work with people before they leave the prison environment, so that when they come out, they have an understanding of what they need to do to find work. And um, the most likely thing to prevent reoffending is employment. So recidivism is based on employment, essentially. If someone can leave prison and they get a job, they are far less likely to reoffend, go back into prison, and to become incarcerated again. So we're really focused on the work. And what can we do with individuals before they leave so that they maybe take some classes while they're in the prisons, get some training, maybe some health and safety certificates for the construction industry, or a level, a math qualification, basic numeracy qualification, something that will show that they can put some effort in, complete something, and will help them get a job afterwards. We also work with them as they come out. So that's called through the gate. It's called through the gate provision, before and after. And our projects have done. So we were given the contracts and targeted with a certain number of employment outcomes, and we have doubled the employment outcomes that we were targeted with.
Nancy, I spoke with William Packard, who wrote a book on neurodiversity within the prison system. And what was interesting to me in the discussion, rather surprising, was not so much the percentage of inmates who had some kind of neurodiversity, but also the guards who were guarding them as well. What have you found in that regard?
Exactly that. Exactly that. In that first project in Southeast London, when I was talking to the governor of the prison about coming in, and I was trying to discuss functional difficulties associated with neurodifferences, like managing time, organizational skills, concentration. He said, "You've just described half my staff team." I said, "Yeah, well, we can work with them too, So I totally agree. There's jobs that people with neurodifferences are good at, and they tend to be those kinds of jobs. Neurodifferences are overrepresented in the prison staffing sector, but also in defense, in security, in police work, in paramedics. There's something about the hypersensitivity that goes on with neurodiversity that allows you to be hyper alert. And this is one of these kind of positive, negative reframe things. It depends how full your glass is. Is it half empty or half full? Because, we pathologize concentration difficulties in the school system. And we say people that can't sit still and concentrate for 8 hours have a disability. If you think about it, sitting still and concentrating for 8 hours is a pretty weird thing to ask of people if you consider the natural state of the human species. It's not something that we should really be doing. So in that circumstance, it's called high distractibility. But if your job is to be kind of doing crowd control and to be aware of where people are and, some sort of conflict that might be going off, then what we call distractibility at school is actually just hyper alert and very responsive and reactive, which you need to be in those situations.
Very interesting. Let's go back to the TV show, The Employables. Do you have any one story that stands out to you that's been on that?
Oh, they all do for different reasons. They all do for different reasons. So I think that there were some different stories in there. So Angela Justice, one of the things that stood out for me with Angela Justice was just how completely unaware she was of how brilliant she was. She had absolutely no idea. Every idea I've ever had about positive assessment, I felt 100% vindicated working with that woman. I was like, this is why I do what I do. This, because you are a brilliant human and you had no idea. And so the joy of watching her realize, she's completed her associate's degree in psychology now. She's just starting her bachelor's degree.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, I keep in touch with them all. So she stood out to me for that reason, because that changed her. It changed her self-perception completely. She had some validation that day. some real validation that she'd never had before. And it's changed her life's trajectory. So she's going to get that bachelor's degree. She's going to become a psychologist, and she's going to be a psychologist. And I'm going to try my hardest to steal her and have her in Genius Within when I will find work for her in Pittsburgh because I want her so much. I'm like, okay, I don't have any clients. I'm going to go get some so that I have some work for Angela. And then the other one that I really liked was Fish. Because Fish absolutely knew what his Genius Within was. You know, when I was filming with Fish, the directors and producers kept kind of getting a bit grumpy with me because they had a format for that show, which was we do the testing, we find out what the Genius Within is, and then they go and do the thing. And I wasn't doing any testing with Fish, and they were like, why are you not doing any testing? Well, because he doesn't need it. But can you not just do the testing? I was like, no, because he needs something else. What Fish didn't have was that thing I just told you about how to get work. So Fish didn't know how to just go out and get work without waiting for the right job to come along. He didn't know he could just start picking up the phone and start bringing in the work. And you know, that's what he's doing now. And the other thing that he didn't know about was how to mitigate the impact of his condition in a workplace scenario. So he didn't know about things like ergonomic chairs, where you can have a reclining chair that's attached to a desk, that you can have your laptop on a panel in front of you so that you can recline and still work on a computer. He didn't know that that kind of equipment existed. And because his Tourette's syndrome was so severe in terms of the strength of the tics, he had some quite serious physical issues. You know, he had some mobility issues and a lot of pain that he was dealing with. And so one of the reasons that he was feeling like he couldn't go back to work in a standard 9-to-5 job is because he couldn't sit for that long. And I was saying to him, you don't need to sit for that long to do what you do. Here's this kind, you can have this kind of chair, you can have this kind of desk, you can work for yourself, you can do consultancy work. And so kind of broadening his mind as to what work could look like, I think was the interesting thing for him.
How can our Different Brains audience get in touch with you, or how can they learn more about you?
Okay, so because I have ADHD, Twitter is my best friend. So the best way to stay in touch with me is to watch my Twitter account, because so at Nancy Doyle Psych, Psych spelled P-S-Y-C-H for the non-spellers out there. So Nancy Doyle Psych. My website is geniuswithin.org, and I have a LinkedIn profile. Just search me up. I'm not hard to find. And there's lots of ways to contact me if you search me up, you know, through the website or LinkedIn or Twitter.
Thank you so much for being with us today here at Different Brains. Keep up the great work you do, and we look forward to seeing you here again.
Thank you for having me.
Exploring Different Brains is a production of Different Brains, Inc. For more information, visit us at differentbrains.org.